I never thought I'd spend my 61st birthday in a trauma bay, staring at the ceiling as a nurse counted the staples going into my scalp. 1, 2, almost done, hon. I didn't flinch. Not because it didn't hurt, it did, but because I had already hit my limit hours ago. Pain was just background noise by then. It happened on my way to the bank. I wasn't rushing, wasn't distracted, just walking like I had for the past 30 years in this neighborhood. Then a screech of tires, a shout I didn't register, and a blur of silver. Next thing I knew, I was on the asphalt, blinking at a stranger who kept asking if I knew my name. I knew it. What I didn't know was why no one in my family had come to the hospital. The first person to show up wasn't my daughter. Not my son. Not my ex-husband. It was a woman in blue scrubs who asked if I had any emergency contacts. I gave her both of my kids' names, Sarah and Jason. She nodded, tapped on her tablet, and promised they'd be notified. That was 3 hours ago. Now I sat upright in a curtained ER bay, wrapped in a paper-thin blanket, blood caked behind my ear, and a hospital bracelet around my wrist like a shameful accessory. My purse had been run over, so my phone didn't survive. No charger, no numbers. Just me and the nagging realization that no one was coming. Until he walked in. I didn't recognize him at first. He had on a crisp jacket, his salt and pepper hair perfectly combed, not a strand out of place. But the moment our eyes met, a memory jolted through me like the very impact that had landed me here. "Philip," I whispered. My voice cracked from disuse. He hesitated at the curtain, unsure. "Sandra?" His voice was lower than I remembered, rougher. I nodded slowly, wincing.
"Yeah."
"What are you doing here?" He cleared his throat and stepped forward awkwardly. "The hospital called me. Said I was your emergency contact. I guess my name's still on the paperwork." My heart twisted. It had been 9 years since our divorce. And yet, my forms hadn't changed. "I guess I never updated it," I mumbled. Didn't think I'd need to. He didn't sit. Just stood there like a guest who'd walked into the wrong house. "They couldn't reach Sarah or Jason?" he asked. I shook my head. Apparently not. He looked uncomfortable, and I didn't blame him. This wasn't supposed to be his burden anymore. But here he was. He finally took the chair beside my bed, glanced down at my hand, which was bruised and swollen. "You always had a high pain tolerance," he said. I gave a small laugh, bitter. "Comes in handy when your kids forget your birthday, and your ex-husband is the only one who shows up after you get hit by a car." That silenced him. We sat in that heavy quiet until a nurse swept in, brisk and efficient, checking vitals and handing me a release form. "You're stable enough to go home, Ms. Whitmore. Do you have someone who can take you?" I didn't answer. Philip did. "I'll take her," he said. I opened my mouth to protest, but stopped myself. Where's the alternative? Call a taxi and bleed into their seats. "Thank you," I said instead. The ride back to my apartment was mostly silent, except for the low hum of the heater and the occasional turn signal. It was an awkward silence, not exactly. More like the kind where too much was left unsaid. When he pulled up outside my building, he hesitated again. "Do you need help getting up?" "I'll manage." "Sure." I looked at him. Really looked at him. Same jawline, same quiet intensity. But something in his eyes had softened. I nodded. "Actually, yeah. Just to the elevator." He helped me out, his hand steady under my elbow. The warmth of it made something in me ache. As we stood waiting for the elevator, he finally asked, "Why didn't you change your emergency contact?" I didn't have a good answer. "I forgot." He raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe I didn't have anyone else who would come," I said, more quietly. He nodded. "You still talk to them? Sarah and Jason?" I gave a dry chuckle. "Talk. Not really. Sarah's in Dallas now. Last I heard, she started dating some big-shot realtor. Jason's out in Oregon, still chasing startup dreams. They call twice a year, Christmas and Mother's Day, usually when they need something." The elevator dinged. We stepped in. "I sent them letters last month," I added. He frowned. "Letters?"
"Yeah."
"Real ones." Thought it might mean more. Told them I'd been feeling unwell. Asked if they'd visit for my birthday. I paused. Never heard back. He didn't say anything. Inside my apartment, I felt self-conscious. The place was tidy but old. Too many years of living alone. Too many reminders of what I'd built and lost. "I'll make you some tea," he said, shrugging off his coat. I should have stopped him. I should have thanked him and sent him on his way. But I didn't. Instead, I sat on the couch, pulled a folded piece of paper from a drawer, and stared at it. It was the letter. The one I'd written to Sarah. The one she never read. And now, the only person who might care about it was the man I'd once promised forever to, and then let walk away. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. Philip stood by the stove, boiling water for tea like this was still his home. It wasn't. Not for 9 years. But he moved with a memory of ease, pulling mugs from the same cabinet, finding the honey in the same drawer. My systems hadn't changed much. Why would they? I hadn't expected anyone else to navigate them. I sat on the couch, the envelope heavy in my hands. "Milk or lemon?" he asked. "Neither," I said quietly. He brought the mug over, set it down gently on the coffee table, and sat across from me. I didn't meet his eyes. "I wrote them letters," I finally said, still looking at the envelope. "One for Sarah, one for Jason. Told them about the fatigue, the dizziness. Told them I'd started losing weight without trying. That something felt wrong." "You didn't go to a doctor?" he asked, careful not to sound accusing. I shook my head. "I did. Eventually. After the letters went unanswered." I could feel the silence stretch between us again, taut with the things we hadn't said since the divorce. But I didn't care anymore. Pain had stripped me of the desire to protect people from the truth. "I wrote those letters because I was scared," I said. "Because I didn't want to get a diagnosis alone. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, hearing it from me on paper would make them take it seriously." But they didn't even call. Not even a text. Philip leaned forward. "Can I read it?" That surprised me. I looked up. His eyes weren't curious. They were tender. Like he needed to understand something, not just for me, but for himself. I hesitated, then held it out. He opened it carefully, unfolding the creased paper. I watched his eyes move across the page. His brow furrowed slightly, his lips parted just enough to breathe slower. He was taking it in fully. "Dear Sarah, I know it's been a while. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty or pull you back into anything you don't want. I just need you to know I'm not feeling well. I've had some symptoms that scare me, and the doctor wants to run tests. I would never ask for much. I never have. But if there's any way you could come visit, just for a weekend, it would mean the world. Not for errands or help or any big thing. Just presence. Just to feel less alone. It's probably nothing." That's what I keep telling myself. But in case it's not nothing, I wanted to try. To reach out. One last time.
Love, Mom.
When he finished reading, Philip folded the letter with care, as if even the creases mattered now. He didn't look at me. He stared down at the paper in his lap. "She didn't respond at all?" he asked softly. "Nope," I said. "Neither of them did. And I know they received them. I sent them certified. I have the tracking slips." He exhaled sharply through his nose. "That's not right. That's not who we raised them to be." "We," I said bitterly. "You walked out when they were grown and mostly gone. I was the one holding their world together all those years. You got to step off the stage." I stayed. Philip didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just nodded. "You're right. I wasn't expecting that. Truth is," he said, "I thought I was doing you a favor by leaving quietly. We'd stopped really talking, Sandra. You know we had. I didn't want to fight anymore. I didn't want to be part of a life where we were just coexisting." "Then why did you come today?" I asked. "Why walk back in like some hero?" His gaze lifted to mine finally. "Because no matter what happened between us, I still care. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's selfish or delusional or too late. But when they called and said you'd been hit by a car and no one else had shown up, I came because I didn't want you to wake up alone." There was a beat of silence. I looked away. The tears were already rising again, and I didn't have the energy to stop them. "You were the only one who came," I whispered. He stood then, not to leave, but to kneel in front of the coffee table and gently take my hands. "I don't know what's going on, Sandra.
Not really.
But if you'll let me, I'd like to help. Even if it's just driving you to appointments or picking up groceries or sitting with you when the loneliness gets loud." The loneliness gets loud. That phrase struck a chord so deep I almost broke apart. I nodded, unable to speak. He didn't say anything more. He just sat there, holding my hands until the tears subsided. Later that night, long after he left, I stood in my kitchen with the light off, the moonlight filtering through the slats of the blinds. I opened the drawer where the second letter still sat, Jason's. I unfolded it slowly, rereading my own words, searching for some error, some harshness that could justify his silence. There was none. I picked up my phone and called him, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I had said everything I needed in that letter. What I needed now was a plan. The diagnosis came on a Thursday. It was raining, not in a dramatic movie scene way, but that irritating drizzle that seeps into your coat and your bones. I'd walked the 2 blocks from the radiology center to Dr. Han's office because I didn't want to sit in a cab thinking about what the scans might show. I figured if I kept moving, the fear couldn't catch up.
It caught me anyway.
Dr. Han's office smelled like lemon disinfectant and quiet dread. Her assistant offered me tea, peppermint or chamomile, and I thought, is there a third flavor for people being told they're sick alone? I chose chamomile. When Dr. Han walked in, she wasn't wearing her usual cheerful coral lipstick. Her scrubs were gray. She sat without pleasantries. "There's a mass," she said gently, hands folded, "in the upper quadrant of your right lung. We did a biopsy last week, and the results are back." Her voice softened even more. "Sandra, it's malignant." My stomach didn't drop. My breath didn't hitch. I didn't feel the world tilt like it does in the movies. I just blinked. And then I asked the most ridiculous question. "Is it small?" Dr. Han gave me a sad smile.
Relatively, yes.
"But it's an aggressive type. The good news is that we've caught it early. With chemotherapy and targeted radiation, we have a strong treatment plan. I'll walk you through it step by step. You won't be alone in this." She meant medically. The team. The system.
Not people.
And that's when it sank in. There was no we. Just me. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the printout she gave me, a timeline of appointments, procedures, treatment cycles. It read like a map to a place I didn't want to go. I called Sarah again. Straight to voicemail. Jason, too. Not even a "call you later, Mom." I stared at my reflection in the bedroom mirror. My graying hair still damp from the rain, the tiny butterfly bandage above my right eyebrow from the accident, the tired lines under my eyes that had deepened over the last 6 months. I whispered to my reflection, "You've done harder things." But I couldn't remember what they were. The next morning, there was a knock on my door. I opened it expecting a package. It was Philip. He stood there holding a paper bag from the bakery on 5th, and a look that told me this wasn't a coincidence. "You didn't return my text," he said. "I didn't know I needed to," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. "I figured you'd want company. I didn't sleep much after yesterday." He placed the bag on the table and began unpacking it. 1 almond croissant, 1 cinnamon roll, 2 large coffees. "You went to Louise's," I said. He nodded. "You always liked their croissants when you were stressed." That he remembered sent a jolt through me, a reminder that at some point he'd really seen me. "I got the results," I said, sitting at the table without ceremony. He looked up.
Didn't flinch.
Didn't overreact. Just waited. "It's cancer," I said. "Lung." He sat down slowly. "You don't smoke." "Sometimes the universe doesn't care," I replied, and for the first time since the diagnosis, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it needed air. Philip leaned forward. "What's the plan?" The simplicity of the question almost undid me. Not "what do you need?" Not "are you okay?" What's the plan? as if this was something we could tackle, build a strategy for, like repainting the living room or refinancing the mortgage. He was already part of the solution, and I hadn't even asked. I start chemo in 2 weeks, I said, followed by radiation. It'll be intense. He nodded. I can handle it, I added quickly, too quickly. Philip just looked at me.
Of course you can.
But you don't have to handle it alone. I opened my mouth to tell him not to get involved, that he didn't owe me anything. But instead I said, Sarah and Jason haven't returned my calls. I know. You know? I called them last night, he said. I got Sarah's assistant. Jason didn't pick up.
I stared at him.
You called them?
Yeah, he said.
I figured they might take it more seriously coming for me. And nothing. By noon, I was at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes and a yellow legal pad. I'd written 3 words at the top, next of kin. Philip sat across from me, glasses perched on his nose as he scanned through a local legal resource guide he'd found in one of my drawers.
He looked oddly domestic.
Familiar. But this wasn't romance. This was something else. Something quieter. Something sturdier. We made lists. Lawyers, medical directives, insurance providers, transportation options for treatment days. But then I hesitated, hovered my pen above one of the legal pad's clean lines. What is it? He asked. I tapped the paper once. If something goes wrong, if the treatment doesn't work, I don't want it to all just go to them. Philip was silent. I'm not trying to be cruel, I added, but they've shown me who they are. And right now, they're people who wouldn't show up if I was dying. He nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time to change the will. I stared at him. You'd help me do that? I'll drive you to the lawyer myself. That afternoon, I called the office of Rebecca Wynn, a local estate attorney I remembered from a community talk she gave at the library. Her receptionist offered me a Monday appointment. I booked it. When I hung up, Philip looked at me and said something that stopped me cold. Maybe it's not just about what you leave behind. Maybe it's about what you protect while you're still here. I nodded, because for the first time in months, I realized I wasn't protecting my peace. But I could start now. Rebecca Wynn's law office sat on the corner of Maple and Broad in a refurbished Victorian house painted deep navy blue with white trim. The windows were tall and clear, the porch lined with potted lavender. It didn't feel like a place where legacies changed. It felt like a place where people drank tea and discussed good books. But I wasn't there for tea. Philip dropped me off with a gentle squeeze of my hand and a quiet, "Take your time." He said he'd wait at the bakery 2 blocks over, and I didn't argue. We had fallen into a rhythm these last few days. Him showing up. Me letting him. Inside, the receptionist greeted me with practiced warmth. "Ms. Whitmore, it's good to see you. Rebecca will be right with you. Would you like anything to drink?" "No, thank you," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. When Rebecca Wynn appeared, I was immediately struck by her presence. She was around 40, sharp-eyed, with thick curly hair pulled into a bun and a gray blazer that gave her an air of quiet command. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, extending a hand. "Please come in." We settled into her office, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains, a small bowl of mints on the edge of the desk. "I understand you're interested in revising your estate plan," she said, opening a fresh legal pad. "Can you tell me what prompted the change?" "I have cancer," I said simply. "Stage 2 lung cancer. I start chemo next week." Rebecca's expression softened, but she didn't offer platitudes. "I'm sorry to hear that. Have you had a chance to think about your current will?" "I haven't updated it since the divorce. It still names both of my children, Sarah and Jason, as equal beneficiaries. But," I paused, drawing in a breath, "things have changed." Rebecca tilted her head slightly. "Go on." "They're absent," I said. They didn't respond when I told them I was unwell. Not even a call back. And now that I've been diagnosed, they're still silent. Rebecca nodded, writing something down. "So, you're considering removing them?" "I don't want to disown them," I said. "But I don't want to reward apathy either. My life, my home, my savings, it should go to someone who understands the value of presence." She glanced up. Do you have someone else in mind? That was the question, wasn't it? I hadn't thought that far ahead. I have a sister, I said slowly. But she lives in Toronto and we barely speak. My parents are gone. My circle is small. I paused. There's someone helping me now. Philip, my ex-husband. He's been driving me to appointments, helping with the paperwork. He showed up when no one else did. Rebecca tapped her pen. And, do you trust him? I looked at the sunlight on the floor. I didn't expect to.
But yes.
Right now, I do. She nodded. It's entirely within your rights to assign beneficiaries outside of your immediate family. You could allocate your estate in whatever proportions you see fit. Some to Philip, some to charity, even individuals you've never met if you wish. That gave me pause. What do you mean by people I've never met? She smiled. It's more common than you'd think. Teachers leaving money to former students. Patients naming caregivers. People who felt seen, even once, by someone else in a dark moment. Something shifted in me.
Because a name had just popped into my head.
Not Sarah. Not Jason. Not Philip. A young woman named Celia Dawson. Celia had been one of my students 5 years ago. An introverted, soft-spoken girl with a complicated home life. She stayed after school often, not for detention, but because she didn't want to go home. I let her sit in my classroom with a book or her sketchpad. Sometimes, I brought her snacks. Once, I gave her a coat from my closet when I noticed her shivering in a threadbare hoodie. She sent me a thank you letter after graduation. I'd tucked it away in my nightstand drawer. I think, I said slowly, I'd like to find someone who reminds me what legacy is really about. Someone who knows the value of small kindnesses. Rebecca nodded, professional but intrigued. That's a beautiful way to think about it. If you'd like, we can set up a charitable trust. Or even a conditional inheritance, where the recipient meets certain values or criteria. I like that, I said. Values, not bloodlines. We talked through logistics, durable power of attorney, health directives, a living will. Rebecca explained everything with the care of someone who'd seen both the worst and best of people during life's turning points. At the end of the appointment, I left with a folder of documents to review and a commitment to return next week with finalized names. But as I stepped into the fresh air outside, I already knew what one of those names would be. Philip was waiting for me on a bench outside Louise's, sipping a cappuccino. How'd it go? He asked. It went differently than I expected, I said. Good different or bad different? I'm not sure yet. He studied me carefully. You look like someone who's finally made a decision. I did, I said. But it's not about punishment. It's about meaning. He didn't press, just nodded and stood. As we walked back to the car, he said something softly. Something that stayed with me. Sometimes showing up isn't about obligation. It's about grace. And for the first time since the diagnosis, I believed I might find grace on the other side of this, if I stopped waiting for the people who never arrived and started building a future with those who already had. The morning of my first chemotherapy treatment began with an odd sense of calm. Not peace, exactly, more like a lull before a storm. Like my body knew that soon, things would change. I wore my softest cardigan and packed a tote with the essentials. A blanket, a novel I probably wouldn't read, and a small notebook. The notebook wasn't for journaling.
Not yet.
It was for tracking symptoms, medications, appointments, side effects. Order in the chaos. Philip arrived at 8:30 on the dot. Reliable, even now. He wore the same navy coat he'd had since the year we separated, and for a strange moment, I felt like I was watching a memory walk up the path. You ready? He asked, holding a thermos. Not even close, I replied, locking the door behind me. But let's do it anyway. The oncology center was less sterile than I feared. The chairs were wide and cushioned. The curtains between treatment bays were thick and patterned, and there were bowls of wrapped candies on side tables. They even had warm blankets. But what struck me most was the other patients, men and women in all stages of treatment. Some wearing hats or scarves, others bald. One woman painted her bare head with colorful swirls. It wasn't morbid. It was human, resilient. I checked in, signed the consent forms, and was led to my bay. Philip sat in the guest chair beside me, unbothered by the hospital smell or the faint beeping of nearby four pumps. The nurse's name was Carla. She had short curls and a quick, efficient way of moving that told me she'd done this 1,000 times. First infusion? She asked. Yes. Then we're going to take it nice and slow. Let your body tell us what it can handle. When she inserted the needle into the port in my chest, I felt a pinch, then nothing. And then the drip began. It was silent. No dramatic music, no alarms. Just a slow push of clear fluid into my bloodstream, carrying both salvation and poison. I glanced at Philip. He was flipping through a magazine but kept glancing at me. You don't have to stay, I said. I want to, he replied, and didn't look up. Halfway through the infusion, I pulled out the notebook. Not to record symptoms yet, but to write a name. Celia Dawson. I underlined it twice, because 2 days earlier, I had gone searching. I found her Facebook profile easily enough. Celia Dawson, 23 now, living in Portland. Still drawing. Her page was filled with sketches, watercolors, and the occasional photo of murals she'd painted for local businesses. In one post, she had captioned a photo of a mural with, "Art is how I survive the noise." It brought tears to my eyes. I remembered that girl who used to stay after class with headphones and graphite-smudged fingers. The one who gave me a drawing of a tree growing out of a broken teacup for Teacher Appreciation Week. She once told me, "You don't know it, but you're the reason I didn't drop out." Just knowing someone noticed me, it made me want to keep going. I had kept that drawing in my desk for years, and now she was the one I wanted to notice. Not out of guilt, but because I understood now what legacy actually meant. By the time the infusion ended, I was woozy and chilled. Carla brought me ginger candies and adjusted the blanket around my legs. You did great, she said. Go home and rest.
Hydrate.
Nausea might hit in a few hours. Philip helped me to the car slowly. How bad is it? He asked once I was settled. I don't know yet, but I'll let you know in 4 hours, I said with a dry smile. He chuckled. You still have that gallows humor, he said. Comes free with every diagnosis. Back home, I lay on the couch, a cup of tea on the end table and the silence of my phone louder than ever. No texts, no calls. But I didn't care as much this time, because when I closed my eyes, I wasn't thinking of Sarah or Jason. I was thinking of Celia. The next morning, the nausea came like a whisper. Not a tidal wave, just a steady creep. I followed the instructions, took the pills, ate plain toast. Philip came by with soup, homemade no less, and sat quietly while I drifted in and out of sleep. You really don't have to keep doing this, I muttered during one waking moment. I know, he said. That's why I'm doing it. By the weekend, I felt well enough to draft the letter. Dear Celia, you may not remember me, but I remember you. 5 years ago, you used to sit in my classroom after school with your sketchpad and your silence. You were one of the most quietly brilliant students I ever taught. I still have one of your drawings. It reminds me that beauty can grow from broken things. I'm writing because I'm sick. And because when I was asked who I wanted to leave my legacy to, your name was the only one that made sense. Not because you owe me anything, but because you're the kind of person I believe in. I've begun setting up a trust that will fund your art education or whatever else helps you build the life you want. I just thought you should know. I don't expect anything in return, but I wanted you to know that you mattered. You still do. With warmth. Sandra Whitmore. I signed it, sealed it, and sat with the envelope in my lap for 20 minutes before deciding I wouldn't mail it just yet. Not because I was unsure, but because for the first time in weeks, I wanted something to look forward to. It arrived on a Wednesday. The sky was a dull gray, the kind of color that settled into your bones and made everything feel heavier. I had just finished forcing down half a banana and some saltine crackers when I heard it, a soft knock at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Philip had dropped off groceries earlier that morning and said he had an afternoon appointment. And my neighbors usually texted if they needed something. The knock came again.
Firmer this time.
I wrapped the cardigan tighter around my shoulders and opened the door. And there she was. 5 years older. Hair shorter. Cheekbones sharper. But still unmistakably her. Celia. "Ms. Whitmore?" she asked, hesitant. I blinked, momentarily disoriented, and managed a breathy. "Celia?" She smiled nervously. "I hope it's okay I came. I got your letter yesterday and
I didn't want to write back.
I wanted to come in person." I opened the door wider without thinking.
Come in.
"Please." She stepped inside slowly, glancing around the living room as if unsure she was really allowed to be there. "It looks exactly like I imagined it," she said, taking in the bookshelves, the old armchair, the tea set on the coffee table. "I'm not sure that's a compliment," I teased. She smiled faintly. "It is." I gestured to the couch. "Sit down. I'd offer you something, but I'm running low on good hosting energy these days." "I'm fine," she said quickly. "I didn't come for anything."
I had to say, thank you.
"And why me?" That question landed like a stone in my chest. I sat across from her, my bones heavy, but my voice clear. "Because you mattered." And I think too many people go through life never hearing that from someone they trusted. You were always steady, quiet, but you had this way of seeing the world. And I saw you. I still do. Her eyes shimmered. "You were the only teacher who noticed when I stopped talking, who didn't push but stayed. That mattered more than you knew." "I knew," I said. "That's why I wrote the letter." She glanced down at her hands. "I showed it to my girlfriend," she admitted. She cried. Said she wished someone had done that for her. I blinked. "Girlfriend?" Celia smiled.
Yeah, I'm
gay. I didn't know that when I was in school. Or maybe I did, but I couldn't say it yet. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "It's a privilege." "I'm studying art therapy now," she added, the words tumbling out.
part-time.
"I work at a bookstore to pay rent. And when I got your letter, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Like, why would anyone remember me? Why would anyone do something like that for me?" "Because," I said, "you're exactly the kind of person I'd want to invest in. You made something beautiful out of survival." "I see that." We sat in silence for a moment. "I haven't told my parents," she said finally, "about the letter. Or about you. They wouldn't understand." I nodded. "That's okay. It's yours to share or keep." She looked up. "What can I do for you?" "Be happy," I said without hesitation. "Make your life a place you want to live in. Use this gift, not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. Let it free you." "I can't promise everything," she said, "but I can promise to try." That's all I've ever wanted from anyone. She stayed for an hour. We didn't talk about cancer. We didn't talk about death. We talked about art and grief and chosen family. We talked about the mural she was painting on the side of a community center. She pulled out her phone and showed me the sketch. A woman standing in front of a storm, her body made of tree bark, her hair rising like smoke into a sky of stars. "It's called Witness," she said. "It's about all the people who showed up when others didn't." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. She saw it and didn't flinch, just reached forward and squeezed my hand. "I'll visit again," she said as she stood to leave. "If that's okay." "It's more than okay," I whispered. "It's wanted." Before she walked out the door, she turned back. "Ms. Whitmore?" "Yes. I know you said you didn't want anything back. But you're getting something anyway. You're part of my story now. And I'm going to make it a good one." That night, I didn't cry from sadness. I cried from something else. Something warmer. Something that felt like healing. The letter I thought I sent to the past had just rewritten my future. Radiation was supposed to be the easier part of treatment. That's what they said. It wasn't. Chemo had knocked me down, yes, but it was a blunt instrument. One that came with clear start and end points. It demanded surrender, but at least it gave you a schedule. A beginning. An end. A brief illusion of control. Radiation, though? Radiation was the quiet thief. Every morning for 5 weeks, I woke up early, made the 40-minute drive to the clinic, lay on a cold metal table, and let a beam of invisible energy burn me from the inside out. Just a few seconds per session, the technician said cheerfully on day 1. But by day 12, I felt like my chest had been slow roasted. My skin was raw and red, and every breath felt like sandpaper scraping bone. And then one morning, something else happened. I passed out in the parking lot. I remembered reaching for my car door and the world tilting sideways. I remembered gravel biting into my cheek, the distant sound of someone shouting my name. And then nothing. I woke in a hospital room, and 4 in my arm, monitors softly beeping. Philip was there. Of course he was. His eyes were tired, but his posture was alert. "You scared the hell out of me," he said quietly. "What happened?" My voice cracked. "They said it was dehydration. Low blood pressure. Your body's exhausted, Sandra." I sighed. "I thought I was handling it." "You've been powering through, but your body's not a warhorse. It needs rest. You need rest." The door opened then, and a nurse stepped in with a clipboard. But she wasn't alone. Celia followed behind her. She had a large tote bag slung over her shoulder and a bright yellow scarf wrapped around her neck like armor. I blinked. "You're here?" "I heard what happened," she said. "Philip called me." I looked at Philip, surprised. "She left her number in your kitchen," he explained, "on the back of that art gallery flyer. I figured you'd want her to know." I wanted to say something. Anything. But the lump in my throat was suddenly too big. Celia stepped closer. "You always made space for people. Even when you were hurting. I figured it was time someone made space for you." She set the tote bag on the table beside my bed and began unpacking it. A soft robe. Scented lotion. A pair of cozy socks with sunflowers on them. And finally a small wrapped canvas. "I made you something," she said. I stared at the bundle, fingers trembling slightly as I peeled the paper away. It was a painting. A woman, silver-haired and strong-eyed, stood barefoot in a field of golden flowers. Her arms were raised to the sky, her head tilted upward. Behind her, a tree grew, not from the ground, but from her chest. Its branches reached outward, covered in leaves, some just beginning to fall. The bottom of the painting had one word, painted in careful script. "Rooted." I looked at her, eyes burning. "It's you," Celia said. "But it's also me. And every woman who held someone else up while no one held them. You showed me how to grow. And now you're still standing, even when it hurts." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just reached out and took her hand. I was discharged that evening. Philip drove me home. Celia followed in her little red sedan. The apartment felt different now. Not because it had changed, but because I had. Because I finally realized I wasn't surviving on fumes anymore. I wasn't waiting for a child to return a call or a family member to finally understand. I had chosen something else. Someone else. And they had chosen me back. Over the next week, Celia came by often. She didn't hover. She didn't fuss. She sat beside me when I was too tired to speak, read from her sketchbooks aloud, or sometimes just left soup in the fridge with little sticky notes. "This one's lentil. Very anti-inflammatory. Sunflower socks are in the wash. Next round coming soon." Philip kept showing up too. His presence had shifted from obligation to offering. Not because he wanted redemption, but because somewhere along the way he had stopped leaving. And I had started letting him stay. One night, as I was brushing my teeth before bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The radiation had faded my eyebrows. My skin was papery and thin. My body bore every inch of the war. But the reflection that stared back didn't scare me anymore. Because she looked like someone becoming. And behind her, on the bedroom wall, hung the painting of the woman with a tree in her chest, arms raised, eyes wide open, rooted and reaching. The call from Dr. Hahn came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting by the window, sipping warm lemon water and watching the breeze stir the branches of the birch tree outside. Celia had just left after dropping off homemade banana bread, her 3rd loaf this month, and Philip was at the store picking up groceries I hadn't asked for, but would use anyway. When the phone rang, I expected another spam caller. Or worse, silence. But it was her. "Ms. Whitmore," Dr. Han said, her voice neutral but warm. "I've reviewed your post-radiation scans." My heart paused. I gripped the edge of the armchair, as if it would steady the moment. "There's been significant response," she continued. "The tumor has shrunk considerably. No signs of further spread. Your body's fighting back." I blinked. "I'm winning." She chuckled softly. "You're holding the line. We're not finished. But this is good. Very good." I didn't cry. Instead, I exhaled. Long, deep. And for the first time since the word cancer entered my life, I felt something like control return. Not over my body, but over my story. Philip came in an hour later, paper bags crinkling in his arms. Before he could speak, I said, "She called." He stopped in his tracks. "And the tumor's shrinking. We're still in the woods, but the trees are thinning." His face lit up, not in a dramatic, tearful way. Just a quiet, deep relief that settled in his shoulders.
"You did it," he said.
"We did it," I corrected. And I meant it. The next morning, the doorbell rang just after 9 a.m. I wasn't expecting Celia or Philip. I wasn't expecting anyone. So when I opened the door and saw Sarah, my breath caught in my throat. She looked tired, flushed from travel, hair pulled into a tight bun, a large tote slung over one shoulder. "Hi, Mom." I didn't speak right away. She shifted uncomfortably. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, not because I had to, but because something in her face, something different, told me this wasn't just a drive-by apology. She stood awkwardly in the living room, glancing at the painting on the wall. "That's new," she said quietly. "It was a gift," I replied. "From someone who shows up." Her cheeks colored. I deserved that. I sat down and gestured for her to do the same. She didn't. "Not yet." "I got your letter," she said. "The first one. Months ago." I read it, and I panicked. I didn't know how to be what you needed. So I pretended it wasn't urgent. I kept working. Told myself I'd call later. And then later became never. I stayed silent. She took a breath. "But then Jason called me last week." That surprised me. "Jason." "He said he talked to you. That you told him about changing the will. He asked me why I hadn't visited. He said, 'We were failing you.'" The air between us felt sharp. "I bought a ticket the next day," she said. "I've been sitting with this guilt for weeks. But it's not just about cancer. It's about all the ways I've pulled away from you. The safe distance I've maintained. Because I didn't want to admit that I've been selfish." I looked at her, really looked at her. The lines around her mouth. The worry in her eyes. Not performative. Not convenient.
"Real."
"And now?"
I asked.
"Now I'm here.
"If you'll have me."
She sat down then, her voice smaller. "I'm not asking you to change your will. I just want a chance to change what comes next." We sat for a long time, not saying much. Until I finally asked, "Why now?" "Because I was afraid," she admitted. "And because I realized the only thing worse than watching you suffer was knowing I abandoned you during it." Tears welled, but she didn't look away. "I brought soup," she added weakly. "And books. And my laptop, in case you want me to help organize the bills or—" I reached for her hand. "Sarah." She looked up. "I'm still angry," I said. "Still hurt. But I'm also tired. And I don't want to waste what time I have left building walls." "I'll stay as long as you'll let me," she whispered. "You'll stay as long as you're present," I replied. She nodded, and I saw it. That flicker of humility I hadn't seen since she was a child. The one that appeared after her first scraped knee, when she ran to me with bloodied palms and wide eyes, not knowing what to do, only knowing she needed help. That night, as she washed dishes and asked questions about Celia and the painting and the timeline of treatment, I didn't stop her. I didn't cling to the grudge. I let her try. Because healing doesn't always arrive when we want it to. Sometimes it comes at the door unannounced. And you have to decide whether you're ready to let it in. Sarah had been with me for a week. Not out of obligation. Not this time. She cooked, cleaned, sat quietly with me during appointments, and even took calls for the online support group I was too tired to speak to some days. She didn't cry when I was weak. She didn't flinch when I asked hard questions. And she never once brought up the will, which, strangely, made me consider reopening it. She was showing up, not in the dramatic, sweep in and save the day kind of way, but in the slow, steady drip of presence, like water finding its way into a dry root. And then, just as I began to think that maybe this chapter was healing, a knock came at the door late Friday afternoon. Philip opened it before I could even get off the couch. Jason. His voice carried a note of disbelief. I looked up and there he was.
Taller.
Leaner. Exhausted. He stepped inside like someone returning to a place they'd only ever visited in dreams. I wasn't sure I should come, he said, eyes darting between us. Then why did you? I asked. Jason dropped his bag and ran a hand through his thick, unkempt hair. Because I read the copy of the will you sent us.
Ah.
There it was. I stiffened. I wasn't mad, he added quickly. Not after I thought about it.
At first, yeah.
It felt like punishment. But then, I realized it was the first time in years you really told us the truth. I said nothing. He looked over at Sarah. She stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, a towel slung over her shoulder, watching him, but not intervening. I haven't been a good son, Jason said, his voice thick. I was selfish, distant. I thought I had time. And then when you got sick, I froze. I didn't know how to be the person you needed. So I avoided it. I swallowed the hard lump rising in my throat. But you writing us out of the will? He said. That made me look at myself. Really look. And I hated what I saw. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder. I've been volunteering at a community clinic in Portland, helping organize care plans for seniors with no family support. They called me a month ago to say one of the patients listed me as an emergency contact. I'd only met her twice. She said I was the only one who listened. He paused. That's the kind of person I want to be. And it started because you told us the truth. He sat down across from me, folded his hands, and looked me square in the eyes. I'm not here to fix anything. I'm here to be accountable, to do better. If you leave me out of the will, I'll understand. But I want to earn back your trust. Not for money.
For you.
The room was very, very quiet. I looked at Sarah. Her eyes were glistening. She gave a small nod, one of solidarity. Then I looked at Jason. My son. The boy who once asked me to sew a torn backpack. The man who now wanted to repair something much larger. I leaned back. You both want to be written back in? I said plainly. No, Sarah said. We want to be seen again. I exhaled slowly. Let the silence sit. Then I reached to the table beside me and opened the folder I had received from Rebecca just 2 days before. Inside were 2 versions of my will. One with them excluded. One with contingencies based not on guilt or apology but action. If you want back in, I said, looking at both of them, then here are my terms. Jason leaned forward. You don't inherit money, I continued. You inherit responsibility. I've started a fund. Part of my estate will go toward a foundation supporting patients without family care. It's named after someone I used to teach. Celia Dawson. Sarah blinked. Celia? She came back, I said. When neither of you did. She painted that. I gestured toward the art on the wall. She fed me when I couldn't hold a spoon. She saw me. Jason nodded slowly. If you want your names to be part of my legacy, I said, you will manage that fund. For 5 years. Together. No salary. No shortcuts. You'll give your time to people like me, alone and afraid and trying to survive. I let the words settle like dust in a sunbeam. Neither of them spoke, until Sarah finally said, yes. Jason nodded. Absolutely. I looked at both of them, long and hard, searching for cracks, for flinches. But I didn't see fear or entitlement. I saw humility.
And readiness.
Then I'll have Rebecca prepare the final version, I said. Jason exhaled, almost as if he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Thank you, he whispered. I looked at them both.
No.
Don't thank me, I said. Honor me. Later that night, after they'd gone upstairs to sleep, Sarah in the guest room, Jason on the pull-out sofa, I walked into the quiet kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Philip stood by the back door, arms folded, watching the stars. Quite a day, he said. I nodded. Too much to feel. He turned to me. You know, this thing you've done with your will? It's bigger than money. You're rewriting your name into the world. I'm rewriting myself, I said softly. He smiled. That too. And in the silence, I realized that legacy wasn't about who you gave things to. It was about what you gave them the chance to become. 3 months later, the daffodils bloomed. They pushed through the soil like they had no memory of winter, as if ice and snow had never blanketed this small patch of earth outside my porch. I watched them from the window one morning, wrapped in a knit shawl Celia had made, a mug of chamomile cradled in my hand. I was still here, weakened by treatment, still catching my breath some mornings, but still here. A few days earlier, Dr. Hahn had used a word I hadn't dared hope for: remission. Not forever, not guaranteed. But for now, the cancer was quiet. No signs of activity. The tumor had been reduced to scar tissue. My blood work, for once, looked more like it belonged to a woman than a battlefield. When she told me, I didn't cry. I just asked if I could walk more. She smiled and said, "Start slow." So I did. On the first warm Saturday of May, we gathered at the Emerson Community Center for something I never could have imagined 6 months ago: the unveiling of the Whitmore Fund for family-free caregiving support. Jason and Sarah stood at the front of the small auditorium, now co-directors of a program offering transportation, hot meals, and companionship to elderly patients with no nearby family. Celia stood off to the side in her paint-splattered jeans, watching the event unfold like a proud older sister.
Philip sat beside me.
He reached for my hand as Sarah stepped up to the mic. My mother taught me a lesson that nearly came too late, she said. That showing up means more than promises. That love isn't about blood or inheritance, but presence. Jason spoke next. When we failed her, she didn't punish us. She gave us a second chance to grow. This foundation is part of that growth. And then Celia came forward, holding a framed canvas. She turned it to reveal a second painting. This one showed 2 figures standing beneath a massive oak tree, its roots exposed and tangled with others, stretching into a dozen smaller trees nearby. In the distance, a third tree stood apart, tall and luminous, with golden leaves scattering on the wind. Etched in the bark of the largest tree was a single word: become.
She handed it to me.
I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears making the image blur in front of me. Later that night, back at home, I sat in my favorite chair, the painting resting on my lap. Jason brought me tea. Sarah folded the last of the laundry. Celia stayed over in the guest room. And for the first time in a year, I felt something that had evaded me through every diagnosis, treatment, and moment of betrayal.
Peace.
Not the peace of perfection, but the peace that comes from clarity, from choosing to build something beautiful from everything broken. In the weeks that followed, the house stayed fuller. Visitors came and went. My support group met here now, often with Celia, painting quietly in the corner while we swapped stories. Sarah helped manage the finances of the foundation, while Jason oversaw the day-to-day operations. They took their roles seriously, not because of the inheritance, but because they had changed. They were becoming, like I had. One evening, I sat with Philip under the old birch tree in the backyard. It had been his idea to prune it last fall. Now it stood stronger, healthier, not unlike the people seated in its shade. Do you think we'll ever get it all right? I asked him. He smiled without looking at me.
No.
But that's not the point. The point is showing up, trying again, being willing to grow. I nodded. Then I reached into my cardigan and pulled out the last unopened letter, the one I had written to myself. I had sealed it in October, just after the first treatment, just before everything started to shift. I broke the seal now. Inside, in my own handwriting: Dear Sandra, if you're reading this, It means you've made it to the other side of something unthinkable. Maybe your kids didn't come. Maybe the cancer didn't leave. But you showed up anyway. You held your own hand. You became something new. And if you're still here, it means you were never really alone. Not where it mattered.
Love.
The woman who finally chose herself. I folded the letter, pressed it to my heart, and closed my eyes. If this story moved you, if you've ever rebuilt your life after being forgotten, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget, sometimes the strongest roots grow in silence. Make sure to subscribe. Your next favorite story might be waiting just around the corner.